Hello, everyone. I'm Dana Perino, along with Pam Bondi, Juan Williams, Ed Henry, and Greg Gutfeld. It's 5 o'clock in New York City, and this is The Five. This is a Fox News alert. The nation breathes a sigh of relief tonight as authorities say the suspected mail bomber has been caught. 56-year-old Cesar Sayoc of Aventura, Florida, has been arrested and charged with 5 federal crimes for sending mail bombs to prominent Democratic politicians and donors. He faces up to 58 years in prison. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge, she's standing by with the latest. Catherine.
Well, Dana, senior Justice Department officials held a news conference a short time ago here in Washington. The Attorney General said political violence of any form is in conflict with the democratic process.
This is utterly unacceptable. Political violence or the threat of violence is antithetical to our vigorous system of self-government. It is a threat to that respect for law and process that allows our people to accept legislation, elections, court rulings with which they do not agree. This is the central feature of our system of government. You advocate for your beliefs enthusiastically, but we peaceably and lawfully comply with the results.
Federal investigators seized the suspect's van, covering it with a blue tarp earlier today, concealing pro-Trump stickers. Sayoc's social media accounts also praising Republicans, slamming Democrats, and showcasing videos of himself appearing at Trump rallies. The Attorney General was pressed on why Sayoc singled out Democrats and at least one powerful party donor.
Why was he targeting Democrats?
I don't know, other than what you might normally expect. He may have been appears to be a partisan, but that would be determined by the facts as the case goes forward.
Men and women of law enforcement here and the work that was done over the last week is something that should make every American proud and grateful. And it's too early at this stage for us to be discussing motivation in this particular case.
And the FBI Director Christopher Wray also asked the public to keep their eyes and ears open because he indicated they're trying to still determine whether they have all the packages or whether others may be in the system. Dana.
Catherine, I did have a question. Christopher Wray, the FBI director, said like 3 times that these were not hoax devices, that they're doing more diagnostics and forensics. So does that mean if they find out more about these devices that they could increase the charges?
Right. That's a great question. They're trying to determine still whether he intended to construct viable devices that would explode at any path along the postal chain or at the delivery point. Remember, he said there was a cell phone on them and they can often be used as a timer as a method of detonation. If they were to find that he had tried to do that but had failed because he lacked the expertise, this could then be an aggravating factor in any future prosecution.
We're going to take it around the table. Ed Henry, you have a question for Catherine?
Catherine, good to see you. I wonder, we heard a lot about DNA evidence, and this seems like a pretty quick turnaround. Obviously, there appeared to be the forever stamps, which are self-adhesive, but there was talk in your reporting about maybe saliva. I don't know if that was from the back of the envelope. What do we know about the evidence?
What we know about the evidence, I think, is really twofold. One is that there was a tremendous wealth of evidence because the bombs did not explode. But secondly, and I think more importantly from the FBI director, that they did quickly recover a latent fingerprint on the envelope that carried the pipe bomb that was going to the Democratic Congresswoman Maxine Waters. And then they were able to extract DNA from other suspect devices. So they had 3 data points. They all aligned with Cesar Sayoc, and then they had his prints in the database because he has a pretty extensive criminal history and was known to law enforcement. So I don't know at this point whether the DNA was linked from saliva or it may have been a fiber such as or a hair that was attached to that black electrician's tape. Remember, I was reporting about that yesterday. That's like a magnet for DNA evidence.
Juan?
Catherine, so I'm so curious about his criminal background and history. What I've read in the accounts today over the wire services is that he was arrested several times for things like allegedly stealing a suit from a store and the like. But we don't see any evidence of political violence previously, do we?
Well, what we were able to find in our research today, one, is that there was a bomb threat. I believe the date was 2000. And two, I don't have a lot more sort of granularity and texture over whether that bomb threat related to a political idea or motivation. But Director Wray said that they hoped in the coming days to have more information about what the motivation was, whether it was political, and even more importantly, whether he was acting alone or he had help from others who were unaware of what he was planning with the packages.
That's a good point. Pam.
And Catherine, that's what I was going to ask you, that these were so many bombs sent pretty much simultaneously. So they haven't told us anything yet about whether he was acting alone or whether he had an accomplice.
I was trying to ask at the news conference, but never got my question in for some reason, about the level of premeditation, right? Because when you're talking about over a dozen devices, that takes a significant period of time for an individual. Was he doing them just in his van, or was he doing them at his mother's home? We don't quite understand the relationship he has with his mother in South Florida, but we were given the impression that he was spending a lot of time in that van, not quite homeless, but getting sort of close to the edge of that. From my experience, 12 devices takes a significant period of time because you got to cut all the pipes, assemble them with the explosive powder, and then he's got to go through the physical process of addressing all of them and then delivering them. So it would have been nice to have that question get in about premeditation, because that can tell you whether for months he'd been planning this, so maybe he was simply a lone actor, or whether it was in a very short time frame, indicating that others may have helped support him.
All right, Catherine, thank you so much. We're going
You're
to
welcome.
leave it
Thanks
there
for
with
having
you.
me.
President Trump just spoke on the South Lawn. We have that tape for you. We can play it for you now.
I did not see my face on the van. I don't know. I heard he was a person that preferred me over others, but I did not see that.
Does that bother you at all?
No, not at all. No, I mean, not at all. No, that there's no blame. There's no anything. If you look at what happened to Steve Scalise, that was from a supporter of a different party. You look at what happened on numerous of these incidents, they were supporters of others. No, I'm just really proud of law enforcement. I think they did an incredible job. And I will see you in North Carolina. If they wanted me to, but I think we'll probably pass. Well, I think I've been toned down. You want to know the truth. I could really tone it up because, as you know, the media has been extremely unfair to me and to the Republican Party. I think the media has been very, very unfair in terms of the Republican Party and the way it's been covered. And they understand that. They write articles about that. Many of them admit that. But the media has been unbelievably unfair to Republicans, conservatives, and certainly to me. But with all of that being said, we're winning, so I like that. Thank you very much.
All right, we haven't had a chance to hear from Greg. I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, well, I know we're going to be talking about the political ramifications in the B block, but it's hard when you play that clip not to just kind of like respond to what he is saying. Well, let's first talk about the bumper stickers for once. I have a rule. It's like cats. You know, if you have a few cats, that's okay. But if you have 60 cats, it's a problem. Anybody who's got that many bumper stickers, they're not hiding, right? They're not hiding. And I don't care what side of the political spectrum you are, it's a good barometer, right? If you see somebody with a lot of crazy bumper stickers, they're probably crazy. And also, I mean, he was arrested for a bomb threat 14 years before Trump became president. So clearly, this guy had a screw loose before he ever discovered the red hat. So I think that there's a lot. He has a paper trail and a criminal trail that clearly shows this guy was just a bad egg, or hombre, as President Trump likes to say.
And given the scope of how many bombs in many states, the work, you can't stress enough what a great job the FBI did. And I mention that because there seemed like almost like a collective sigh of relief from the Attorney General and the FBI Director. When you think about the year both of them had him.
Yeah, they needed a win.
Yeah, Christopher Wray, since day one, has been under fire from the president. He's been trying to clean up the mess from James Comey and Andrew McCabe. And as many at this network have said for a long time, we haven't been critical of the men and women who put their lives on the line every day at the FBI to protect us. It's been about the leadership that went partisan in some cases. And I think, let's not forget, in your home state, Parkland,
Yes.
With the shooter, there were signs that the FBI missed as well. So they've had a brutal several months. And in this case, they came together and clearly busted their butts and got to the bottom of this very quickly.
They did. And Kirstjen Nielsen and Homeland Security, the Postal, Secret Service, everybody just worked together, it appeared, in such a great way and moved so fast. And, you know, a point that you made, I've seen in my career, the people who make bombs usually have a history, an escalating pattern of violence. So it does not surprise me that he had this in his past.
Well, you know what's funny is that I keep going back to this, how easy it is to paralyze and create fear in a country. All you need is postage, all you need is pipe, and one person. There's 330 million people. I think you have to be really thankful that something like this is rare.
Right.
Because you know, anybody can do this, and by the way, there, you know, we have to admit that there will be copycats because there always is.
You can't track every single person.
You know, when we were talking about law enforcement, what struck me was how appropriate Jeff Sessions was in his comments today, because I don't think he played any games. I don't know if he expects to be gone shortly after the midterms, but he said this is clearly a partisan act. And he said, you know, we have had to go after this, and it should not be, and this is not the way that we should conduct ourselves as Americans. Given our political
differences. It also
differences.
is impressive the new technologies that are available for them to be able to track this down so quickly.
But I don't think it's a surprise that Sessions would say that, because Republicans, they're about process, and process has no political influence. They don't care if the murderer is a Republican or a Democrat. Sure. It's a murderer. So when he's up there and they're asking about it, he goes, yeah, he's a partisan, but I don't care about that. The guy's a bomber. He should fry.
Ah, but you check out what they're saying about the caravan and other things. There's the president at the very top who's very political, and I think Sessions clearly separated himself out.
Isn't the other thing, though, that how the country was not paralyzed?
Yeah,
I mean, there were
true.
multiple potential bombings, and people were not scared to come out.
Well, we should
we're
say that, just to
people.
remind you, Secretary Nielsen of Department of Homeland Security, the NYPD, FBI director all said there could be more out there. So if you see something, say something, be safe, call the authorities, and they'll take care of it. All right, more developments on the breaking news on the arrest of that mail bomb scare suspect up next.
The president.
He spends most of his time at his rallies throwing verbal bombs at all the people that receive these bombs in the mail.
There's no ever any acknowledgement of ownership on his part that he's feeling these flames. He said he wants a message of unity, yet he leads rallies where his supporters still chant "lock her up," and he calls the press an enemy of people. Of course this is going to happen.
Of course the president didn't direct this. He's not technically responsible for this, but he is responsible for not just allowing the chant CNN sucks at his rallies, but stoking it, making clear that he likes it. And all you need is one, forgive me, crackpot. And looks like one may have emerged.
Well, former President Barack Obama speaking just a few moments ago at a rally in Milwaukee. He did not specifically mention this incident or President Trump, but did talk about civility. Watch.
I'm hoping you think it's wrong to hear people spend years, months, vilifying people, questioning their patriotism, calling them enemies of the people. And then suddenly you're concerned about civility. We can have disagreements, but there has to be a certain code. There has to be certain rules in terms of how we treat each other and operate in the public sphere.
Well, that seems interesting, since it was just a week or so ago that Hillary Clinton said there shouldn't be civility, basically, right now, Pam. And it's rich because Maxine Waters is among the critics, and she said in the last 24 hours that the president is promoting violence when, as I remember it, she was saying, don't let the cabinet rest. Don't let them eat a meal at a restaurant. Let's go after them.
Go after supporters of President Trump, and that's exactly what happened to me. You know, I was in a movie theater, at a movie theater, and it was the Maxine Waters rhetoric. These people were verbatim repeating the Maxine Waters talking points, screaming in my face, stopping me. Then after it happened to me, after it happened to Sarah Sanders, after it happened to Kirstjen Nielsen, she doubled down. She said it again. And now for Maxine Waters to continue and blame it on the president is disgraceful. The first thing President Trump did was come out and condemn these actions.
Oh, come on. You know what? This is unbelievable. Even in the middle of the night, last night, President Trump is tweeting out that the press is the one to blame. It's unbelievable. But here's the thing.
And you think
the president is not. What?
President's not to blame.
No, I was about to say, I don't think the president can be directly blamed, but you can't ignore his rhetoric. I'm amazed to hear people who earlier in the week were talking about this is a false flag operation. It's really the Democrats. And I'm talking about prominent Republican voices, Ann Coulter, Rush Limbaugh, Michael Savage, going on in this way. And now it's, oh, don't pay attention to the president's rhetoric, even though he says Hillary Clinton's evil. The Second Amendment people, the gun folks, can take care of Hillary. Barack Obama was tapping me. He's a liar. All of this horrible stuff. We're not accustomed to it in American life. Dana worked in the White House. Ed, you've covered several presidents. You understand that this kind of rhetoric from the president is different than anyone else in the world speaking. He has made a habit of demeaning and dehumanizing his political opponents.
You had a Chiron on CNN yesterday saying the president will not take responsibility for essentially inciting a bomber. There's no evidence that he incited anyone, Greg.
Oh, no. What about that van, Ed?
I can't...
Did that incite it?
Oh, I think it's clear that his passions were aimed specifically at the targets of Trump's rhetoric.
All right, let Greg in.
Well, it's very hard to take lectures from Democrats about civility. Let's take the long view back, okay? Let's look at decades. Let's look at the last 2 years, which you've called the president Hitler, you've called him racist, you've said he's clinically insane, morally unfit. That's just 2 years, within 2 years. Right. But who has been stoking anger for decades? Who's claimed that the political is personal, meaning they could invade your life. I don't want lectures from people who pardoned the FALN, a terrorist group, who justified the murder of police officers, who allowed them to flee, killers to flee. They said nothing about Assassination Theater in Central Park. They said nothing about the assassination revenge fantasy in the New York Times. They said nothing about Kathy Griffin. They said nothing about Johnny Depp, Madonna, Snoop Dogg. What else did they do? They fundraised with Bill Ayers. He was an actual terrorist. His co-terrorists blew themselves up. I don't want lectures from these people about civility. They can shove it up their tush. I'm sorry if that's heated rhetoric.
It is heated rhetoric, and
shove it up your tush?
Wrong.
No, I thought that was very civil.
I thought that was
tush was a better word than the word I wanted to use.
What? I mean, the reality
I wrote a book.
Wait.
I wrote a book called Joy of Hate 5 years ago, where I talked about this phenomenon of demonization by activists and politicians. I warned this would happen. I wrote 13 chapters on this. We talked about it on this show. So I can't take a lecture from people who ignored me about this concern.
Well, I'm just saying that if you look at Charlottesville, if you look at Pizzagate, there's a real
Those are the ones you always bring up, Juan.
No.
I can bring up 50.
Bring them up because I think that's the reality, and it's as opposed to
in
saying,
your filtered
somebody
worldview.
Interrupted me. Somebody said you should confront officials. Somebody said
you think you're not condemning what Maxine Waters said and did, and then said it again and again?
Let me just tell you something. We were out in where were we? We were in Dallas earlier this week. Guy comes up to me, big Trump guy, right? He wants an autograph and a picture. What does he say to me? He says, "I'm one of your trolls. I'm attacking you in your new book and all this stuff," and then calls me a vile name, and then asks for a selfie. This is not normal behavior.
That's awful.
To be fair, that was Kilmeade.
But that doesn't mean the president is inciting people, Dana. It doesn't?
Well, here's the thing. I started going back to June 2015, right? When this campaign got started, I was super uncomfortable with the rhetoric, always have been. A lot of people said to me that one of the reasons that President Bush's approval ratings were not what they could have been is because I didn't fight back hard enough with language that would have been tougher. And it just wasn't in my nature. That's just not how I'm doing it. Everybody running for office right now could admit, and they do admit, that the rhetoric is too heated. So everyone has a personal responsibility. Civility is a choice. Every time you open your mouth, you can decide what you want to say.
But Dana, you can't be lectured by them about civility.
I don't feel lectured by anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, no, I don't.
You know how the left has treated conservatives.
I know what they said about President Bush. I believe,
what they've said about women, conservative women.
Well, God, that's a whole list. We could go on. This show would never end if we talked about, if we point by point, but you said that, and then he said that, and she said that, and he said that. It would never end. Last week there was a poll, NBC said 90% of people in America agree that we are too divided right now.
All right.
If 90% of us agree on that, we should be able to actually decide to do something about it.
But
read
one second.
Steve Scalise's editorial op-ed. It's great.
We just got some new video of the suspect down in Florida. This is new video that's just coming into our newsroom. So you can obviously see him being let in. He's handcuffed, of course. We had seen the mugshot earlier today, but this is our first video actually seeing the suspect briefly there as he's taken further into custody. But one, I wonder, you've got Joe Biden, the former vice president, thinking about running for president. Yeah. He said, among other things this week, that he thinks we should lower the temperature. I covered the 2012 campaign. And among other things, he was speaking to a mostly black audience, I remember, and he said that Mitt Romney was going to put you all back in chains. Mm-hmm. How did that lower the temperature?
No, I think that's heated rhetoric, but it's nowhere near.
But to Greg's point,
why
is Joe Biden lecturing Donald Trump?
Nobody's lecturing. Everybody's.
Yes, he is.
I don't think so. I think what people are saying is that we are incredibly divided as a country, and we have a president, a leader, who indulges in the kind of demeaning, dehumanizing rhetoric that is damaging to our ability to hear each other, to talk to each other. Instead, we get locked into what Greg was just doing. Whataboutism. Well, you did this.
You've been doing that forever. Whataboutism. That's kind of
also,
ironic.
I think that it's important to say that violence is not, speech is not violence. Mm-hmm. And we have to be able to separate that. Like we have a First Amendment in this country for a reason. You might not like the rhetoric, but there are people on the fringe that might react to certain things from the left or the right. And we know that happened to Steve Scalise. Yeah. But nobody said that Bernie Sanders is to blame for that.
Or MSNBC.
I see this as the same.
You know what's interesting is somebody said, like, oh, it only takes one crackpot, right?
Yeah.
So are we going to change the way we are, a 330 million population, to do the favor for one crackpot? We better look. And the other point is, everybody's lying about civil discourse. The people that are saying we need to tone it, they are lying. I believe you, Juan. I think you feel that way, but I don't think the Democrats, the moment they get a chance to screw you from behind, they will. They do that politically. They will say horrible things about you during campaigns. At least Trump does it to your face. Yeah. That's the most transparent insult you will ever get. Comes from him. Isn't that healthier?
Greg, what do you think, though, about all these conspiracy theories, these false flag theories coming from leading conservative voices this week?
It's foolish.
Okay. All right.
All right, we agree.
Meanwhile,
I disagree.
You can do it agreeably. President Trump, meanwhile, considering a bold plan to stop the caravan of migrants. Details on that coming up next.
No trouble. I'm all about that bass,
They've upset Greg with that song.
It's the worst song ever, and they keep using it.
What? You don't like it? All right. President Trump is considering signing an executive order that would stop migrants and asylum seekers traveling in the caravan from entering the U.S. The president commented on the issue earlier today at the White House.
Well, they called up the military. We're not letting them in. They ought to go back now because we're not. Now, do we want them to apply and come in legally? Absolutely. Yes. And millions of people are right now waiting, and they've been working this process for, in some cases, 10 years. And they're almost ready to come in. And then they look on television and they see people just walking in. Not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
This caravan development comes as a new poll shows the midterms will be all about Trump. Roughly 2/3 of voters say the president will be a key factor when they cast their ballots. Now, Pam, the president today was saying, you know, all the political talk on TV is about the bomber. Hey, what about the caravan? And hey, Republicans, get out there and vote. How should we understand what the president is saying?
Well, former President Obama was out there and didn't even mention the bomber campaigning. The midterms are happening whether you want them to or not, Juan, and people have got to get out there and vote. The president's statements were completely appropriate. They've caught the guy today. And now he's moving on, and he's campaigning as hard as he can. He's going to every state. He's going to be in Florida again, North Carolina, and working very hard on the midterms. At least he's addressed it. President Obama didn't even address it.
Well, I'm not sure it was in the. I think the president is Donald Trump, not Barack Obama at the moment. But Ed Henry.
Thank goodness.
Ed Henry, what we see is that in the numbers right now, this is all about Trump. And we see a high proportion. It says 64% of the people who say, 2/3 of voters say that they're basically voting pro or anti-Trump, but 64% say they would vote for the Democrats to oppose or have a check on Trump. 32% said they would vote to support President Trump. What do you make of this?
What I make is that he's the Republicans' best weapon in these midterms. And so it was a risk, it was a gamble by the White House to nationalize these elections. People like to vote for their local congressman or woman based on some of the local issues. When you nationalize it, it's risky. And there was a New York Times piece a few weeks ago saying this is going to blow up in the Republicans' face. I think the opposite has happened. I think the president's rallies have had a real impact in these battleground states. And evidence of that was today, the Washington Post had this piece where they went to California, where there's something like 8 critical House races. And the Democrats think they're going to flip 5 or 6 of them. And they interviewed all these voters who said, actually, we don't think the Democrats are going to win a lot of these races. And these Democratic voters are nervous that it's going to be like election 2016 redux, where they're going to be left crying like they were on election night at Hillary Clinton's headquarters. So these were Democrats in the Washington Post saying Trump has gotten out there, President Trump, and has lit up his base between Kavanaugh, the caravan, the other issues that he's focused on. And Democrats may not like it, but he has nationalized the election. Yes, he's made it about himself for better or for worse, and it's fired up Republicans.
And it's working.
Dana, so what the poll, this is an NPR poll, also showed is Democrats rank health care number 1, climate change, the economy. But for Republicans, it's jobs, the economy, and then immigration.
So the other aspect here is Latino voters. The interesting information out today, like they don't feel like they're being addressed by Democrats, that they are not just monolithic voters on one thing, on immigration is not motivating them to get out to vote. So Democrats are worried a little bit about that. And the thing about the caravan is that it is visual. Okay, so President Obama saying that he wanted to send troops to the border is like the same thing as President Trump doing it. It just happens to be a week before the midterms, but the caravan is there. But it's not about the caravan, though. And I think the White House could do a better job of explaining to people it's the daily assault on the border of 640 or so average attempts a day to cross the border. So in addition to the caravan, there's all of these things happening there. And I think that President Trump will start to try to get something with Mexico like he has with Canada, which is Canada agrees to deal with asylum seekers in Canada. People that want to come into the United States. Canada says, we will process them here. We should have the same thing in Mexico, and President Trump has an opportunity with the new leader that's taking over in December or January in Mexico. He could try to do that because this issue is something interesting for the midterms. It's not the number 1 issue for everybody, but it will motivate some people.
Greg?
Yeah, I think it'll be, no one's going to talk about this in a few days. That's what I think. But I think it's what Trump said was very important because he mentioned the word process. And when he explained it as a process, you could understand the idea of line cutting, that if you're in the process for 10 years trying to become a citizen and you see this, you think, you sense that it is unfair. And the Democrats are anti-process. And that's why they can push these foolish ideas and then demean those against them. Because they know the Republicans will get the job done. They know they're going to protect the border. They know that the agents will be out there. So they can actually romanticize a terrible idea, knowing that the Republicans will actually fix the problem. And it's sad because it's not going to end well for those poor people that are marching along. They're the pawns in all this. They're the pawns. Left-wing activists and politicians have pushed them along, and they're not going to get in. Maybe a few of them will. They will all be turned back.
All right. Anti-Trump lawyer Michael Avenatti could be in some very, very big trouble. We'll fill you in next on The Five.
A Trump lawyer and his client Julie Swetnick for criminal investigation for potential conspiracy to provide false statements to Congress for obstructing the investigation of Justice Brett Kavanaugh. I think his 5 minutes of fame are about over. Avenatti.
Yeah, I don't know who's having a worse week, him or Megyn Kelly. Wow. But if you notice Avenatti, he follows a plan. He finds somebody that he wants to be perceived as a victim, and uses that victim to catapult himself to the spotlight. So first it was Stormy, then it was Swetnick, who was obviously suspicious, and then he does, like we challenged somebody to a fight, Donald Jr., and he said it would all go to charity. So he's always using that to get higher and higher. How does he skate by ethics committees?
In fact, he might need the money from a fight like that to pay the rent at his office. Apparently, he was 4 months behind on his rent at his office.
Yeah.
Then he had a former partner he owes millions of dollars. He says he's going to appeal it. So that's the bad week you're talking about. And look, this is America. Guess what? Innocent until proven guilty, as we saw for Justice Kavanaugh. And if you come up with false charges, where in the case of Julie Swetnick, the story kept changing, there might be consequences.
And Dana, what about it? He said to Time magazine, which he's now denying, and there's a transcript of, that it would be better for a white male to be the Democrat presidential candidate.
I'm not sure how you deny something that's in a transcript.
Exactly.
That's
pretty, he's making a run in 2020.
He definitely wants to run for president, but he makes headlines for all the wrong reasons. And instead of becoming the Democrats' version of Trump, he's just a discredited carnival barker. And the Democrats should start to distance themselves from him because he's actually taking up a lot of time and energy, and they have no message at all.
I am accredited carnival barker.
Well, those are the best
You take exception to
but
that?
I do think when the history books are written, what Avenatti did during the Kavanaugh hearings, it was the pivot point for when people started to support Kavanaugh and believe him.
So I don't want to support Kavanaugh. I don't even know that Democrats have ever embraced Kavanaugh, but I do want to say Avenatti. But I do want to say that you're not a carnival barker. You're a Juan barker.
Thank you.
You bark at me. But I do wonder why Grassley referred this to the justice. It made me uncomfortable, despite all the questions we have about Avenatti, because it looks like you're going after a political opponent. No. The deal is settled. Kavanaugh's
they went after
there.
a political opponent.
If you mislead a Senate committee, there should be consequences. I'm not saying he did.
I
don't look at it.
Maybe he said, hey, this girl said something to me, but
wait, the whole thing about Kavanaugh was that the left was saying he perjured himself and that was punishable by the Justice Department. Avenatti lied to the Justice Committee.
I don't know that.
And that's why they referred it to the Justice Department.
But I'm saying,
so they can check it out.
is it the case that he said, hey, this young woman says she has a case, and now they're sending him to the Justice Department? It seems a little like
she provided a sworn statement and then went on NBC News and said things that were totally different. That's a problem.
And they were trying to seek the truth, and then they had to go off on this red herring that proved to be ridiculous.
We're doing Fan Mail Friday. It's up next. It's one of the fans at the Fan Mail.
Fan Mail Friday is up next, according to Greg Uphill.
All right, former Trump campaign aide George Papadopoulos answering questions yesterday, finally, about his interactions with key figures in special counsel Robert Mueller's probe and speaking out about what he believes. And he believes he was set up, and so do others. Congressman Mark Meadows opening up after the meeting.
There is even a greater confirmation in my mind that there was inappropriate behavior on behalf of the FBI and DOJ. And I can tell you that he was very insistent that not only was there no collusion, but there was not even the opportunity for collusion based on his contacts.
Former Trump campaign advisor himself in studio. The first interview after that closed-door meeting, George Papadopoulos. George, thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks so much for hosting me.
You believe you were set up?
I believe there was tremendous misconduct on the government's behalf regarding my case. And given certain information that I learned yesterday that I can't publicly disclose right now, I'm actually even considering withdrawing my agreement I've come to with the government.
Those who, under previous lawyers, you agreed to plead to lying to the FBI and getting 14 days in jail, and you served 1 day, right? So you just said, what makes you think you want to withdraw that?
You know what, to have to serve even 1 day in jail for something that now it seems that was completely orchestrated and I was framed in many ways, it's just something by principle and by precedent, I would never want another American to go through something like I'm going through again. So if I end up deciding to fight this, I would be doing it more so to assure that this precedent doesn't affect a future American who might join a presidential campaign or anyone for that matter.
So you tell me if I got this right. You are working to help Israel prior to President Trump running for office, to help Israel do the best they can with this new oil discovery. And you're hooking them up with Greek officials, and you're trying to get a buyer for their oil and be able to extradite their energy. That would put a red flag up to the Obama administration. They didn't like you doing that.
That's right. I mean, there's this misunderstanding that I was this sort of a Russia insider. I have absolutely no contacts whatsoever in Russia. I've never been to Russia. I have no Russian friends. But I had a lot of contacts in the Middle East, in Israel, and Egypt. And what I really think this is all about is there was some sort of red flag that the Obama administration and possibly his DOJ put on me for my contacts in Israel. If it was politically motivated, I'm not sure. It seems like that now, given certain information I learned recently. But that's really what this is all about.
So George Papadopoulos gets to the attention of Donald Trump, and he adds you to his foreign policy team, an unpaid position where you're going to use some influence and hopefully get a job if he wins.
That's right.
So you decide when David Cameron rips Donald Trump to write an editorial saying it's unfair to do that. And all of a sudden, the antennas go up with British intelligence. Am I correct?
Absolutely. As soon as I gave this, it was an interview to the Times of London, I think around May 1st or 2nd of 2016, where essentially I told the UK Prime Minister, look, back off from the candidate that I'm supporting, and you shouldn't be calling him an idiot or whatever he was doing about candidate Trump's proposal for a Muslim ban, which I think many people at the time in the United States were supportive of. And as soon as I gave that interview, that's when my life completely turned upside down. I was being followed in London. I had officials from the U.S. Embassy, which seemingly were intelligence officials, reaching out to me. Alexander Downer wanted to meet. And it was at that meeting with Alexander Downer where he told me, you better stop bothering David Cameron and you better tell Trump to stop bothering him too. And
now, think about this, George. The Australian ambassador, who, by the way, gave millions of dollars to the Clinton Foundation, is telling you to stop bothering David Cameron. You're an American who happens to be working unpaid for Donald Trump. John Radcliffe is hearing all this in the meeting yesterday and said this.
Justice is a blindfolded lady holding a set of scales. No one's finger is supposed to be on the scales.
Fail. Like earlier this year when we saw a ransomware attack which targeted the city of Atlanta and for testimony, I can say is consistent with a lot of other testimony to the point that neither she or Peter Strzok and the folks at the center of the
I have no idea what just happened there, but John Radcliffe is one of the people talking to you. So Alexander Downer's talking to you, but prior to that, you were talking to a guy named Mifsud.
That's right. Yeah,
Joseph Mifsud.
Yeah, so I think I need to clarify who this person, Joseph Mifsud, is for the audience.
He reached out to you.
Yeah, Joseph Mifsud was the professor, this Maltese professor, who dropped the information on me about the Russians having Hillary Clinton's emails.
So just prior to that, he reached out to you for what reason? He wanted to talk to you about energy.
So no, we meet in Rome, and I never quite understood exactly why I was meeting this person at this university in Rome through my old company, which I now found out is some sort of Western intelligence front group, which I didn't know at the time. So the entire meeting with Joseph Mifsud from beginning to end seems completely orchestrated, and the most important fact is just a couple days ago, this man's lawyer went public and stated, listen, everyone, this narrative about my client, Joseph Mifsud, is completely wrong. He's not a Russian agent targeting Papadopoulos. He was actually working at the behest of the FBI when he was talking with Papadopoulos, when he was interacting with Papadopoulos. Now, unless his lawyer is slandering his client and he's awaiting a massive lawsuit for libel, I'm not sure he's lying.
Joseph Mifsud comes up to you and he says, I hear these Russians have Hillary Clinton's emails.
Yeah.
You listen, say, okay.
Yeah.
Alexander Downer comes up to you a few days later and said, what do you know about Hillary Clinton's emails?
That's allegedly what happened. I don't remember ever talking to Alexander Downer about emails, but let's assume that's what happened at this meeting. It seems completely suspicious that a week or so after Joseph Mifsud drops this information on me in London, unsolicited, then Alexander Downer apparently wants to figure out info on this particular topic. It just seems that it was some sort of sting operation gone bad, to be quite honest with you.
Word is that Downer taped that conversation. Downer all of a sudden feels motivated in July of 2016 to call the FBI and say, I'm really concerned. I had this conversation with George Papadopoulos. And they say, really? So they start following you and start questioning you. The FBI questions you. And then at what time they say you lied to us.
So I didn't actually have my first interview with the FBI until January of 2017, so it makes no sense that if Alexander Downer had this information about me, that I was some sort of Russian conspiracy person, why was I interviewed only in January of 2017 when I met Alexander Downer in May of 2016? It makes absolutely no sense.
So you're wondering, next thing you know, the FBI is talking to you, and you're basically under house arrest. How did that feel?
I mean, it's been very difficult because, my livelihood is basically ruined at this point. All my business was based on traveling abroad and domestically. I have travel restrictions. It's been very difficult on my wife, myself. We've gone through a lot. And, the most beautiful thing, though, out of this entire episode has been the American public support for me and my family, and I'll never forget that.
And how do you feel about President Trump?
I'm a big supporter of President Trump. I think he's doing great things for this country, and I never lost faith in the man.
Did they try to get you to flip on President Trump?
I can't really get into details of exactly what was going on with the FBI, but all I could say is I'm a firm supporter of President Trump and his agenda.
Do you have any Russian connections?
I have absolutely no Russia connections whatsoever, unless you consider a think tank analyst in Russia a connection that I've never met, and only through email, and this Maltese professor who apparently was working with the FBI.
Now under hiding somewhere in Italy. Mysterious. Yeah. So who framed you? I mean, from the best you know, you're not a detective.
Yeah. I mean, as I stated, all my contacts were completely in the Middle East, in Israel in particular, in Europe. I had absolutely no contacts in Russia. Just given that, how on earth could a man like me be at the center of a Russia conspiracy unless I was completely framed by Western intelligence to make it seem that Papadopoulos was interacting with Russians and that he's the patsy that started this whole investigation?
Do you feel like this was a plot to unwind Donald Trump's candidacy and presidency?
I truly believe that it was likely some sort of plot by Western intelligence to assure that if candidate Trump is elected, remember this whole insurance policy, that there would be a precedent or some excuse to really try and squeeze him as he's trying to be squeezed now.
And do you believe that someone had a FISA warrant on you like they did Carter Page?
I don't have real evidence yet about that, but let's just say after my testimony yesterday, I'm starting to believe that more and more and more.
George, somebody who read the transcript of the Downer conversation said, for the life of me, I don't know, I've never met George Papadopoulos, but I don't know why he pled. What do you tell that lawmaker?
Let's just say maybe it was a chaotic moment when I pled, and that's exactly why I have new counsel now, and we're actively looking into new options and possibly withdrawing from this agreement right now.
So, and now it begins your rehab. Will you wanted to testify publicly. Yeah. They thought to get more behind closed doors. What's next for you?
I definitely still want to testify publicly. I want to use this experience as part of my patriotic duty to really give back to this country, to expose corruption, and to assure that nothing like this ever happens again to an American citizen.
And get out of that plea agreement, right?
That's the idea. That's the idea.
George Papadopoulos, if they launch the Mueller probe because of your conversation, it is a complete, total sham.
I have to agree with that.
Thanks, George.
Thanks so much,
Appreciate it. All right. All right. Coming up straight ahead, we'll have more Fox and Friends, including some, Ed Henry's going to be out here shortly. Don't move.